Tenable Network Security, creators of Nessus, the world's best vulnerability scanner. Jumpstart your security program today and evaluate Security Center CV, the continuous monitoring solution. For more information, visit them on the web at tenable.com. ProXPN is the leading VPN service offering free accounts, excellent premium features, and an outstanding commitment to privacy and security online. Use the discount code WEEKLY and save 50% off for life. NetSparker, the developers of desktop and cloud-based web application security scanners that enable you to automatically identify vulnerabilities in your web applications and web services. NetSparker scanners employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities with a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at netsparker.com or email them at contact@netsparker.com. Welcome back, everyone, to Security Weekly. This is the security news for this week. I've got a cast of characters here in studio. We've been geeking out over Google Glass, brainwave readers, HoloLens, the telepresence device, all interesting stuff. Russell, thank you for bringing all of your cool and interesting technology. And it's kind of funny, Doug was talking about some of the old technology that you have at home. The
Tinker
big,
Toys,
the
Legos.
Backup, what was the backup? The
Erector.
Tapes, the backup tapes.
Well, just got like magnetic reels that came off
reels.
IBM 360, 370. You know that there actually used to be a job title called Tape Monkeys.
Yes.
And we had,
not that kind. I was a different kind.
Well, yeah, but we
had
actually
kind of monkey.
A different kind of mechanical backup tape monkey.
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
There were the big cartridges. It was IBM. And
well, they
had to turn the
that's called a disk pack. So that's actually a disk pack that went down into a super cooled array, and it had platters in it. So they were like big platters.
These were for kind of PC based.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant mainframe
stuff. They plugged
stuff.
into like a big, almost like a SCSI port, and it had a little a knob on the front.
I think I remember that.
And you turn the knob, and that's what ejected the
distant
tape.
past.
But they made the knobs. The
What's
knobs
that?
must have been made in like China or something, because the knobs would fall off. So I had a pair of vice grips that would cinch onto the knob in the front, and that's what it used to turn. And I go around to all the developers' workstations and run their backups at night. That was my job. I was a mechanical. That was my first job in technology.
We had people where they put their arms.
Called backup boy. That was my.
There you go.
title.
Well, we would put our arms through the tape reels when I had to take them to the vault.
Fitting for you.
I could put like 8 reels on each arm and carry them down to the vault like this, and you took them to the vault and put them away, and you had to get fresh ones.
Token ring.
Yeah,
IBM Token Ring Networks.
I had my token ring clear. Was it a ring clear? Was that what they called it?
I don't know what they called it.
It was a little
I can't remember
device.
I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it was called.
Red like LED thing on it, and you could see it, and that's when
it's a Terminator.
Yes,
it's a Terminator.
Oh, like a SCSI Terminator.
Yeah.
It was kind of like the thing in Men in
Well,
Black.
it's the same thing as a SCSI Terminator, because what it does is soaks up the signals that are coming down the wire.
Right.
Otherwise, they just keep bouncing back and forth, and that's called mirroring. And it was actually an early kind of denial of service attack, was people could pop Terminators off.
I used to
and the whole network would just go.
Token ring network all the time. It was very volatile. But so we ran the gamut of technology. I want to talk about two interesting stories this week. One is in WordPress, and one is Microsoft Ole. Ole, or object linking embedding. And it's interesting. After I was writing up these two stories, and I'm like, wow, that's like the same damn vulnerability on two totally disparate technologies. So the first one is exploits against, get this, a WordPress plugin, WordPress mobile detector plugin. And the article quotes, exploits against the 0-day are difficult because it requires the allow_URL_f open option to be enabled. Essentially, this is the remote file include attack for WordPress. Most modern WordPress installations, this is turned off.
Right.
It's interesting how you think about, I'm writing a WordPress plugin and I really want to just load a bunch of code, buy a URL from another website. Why would you code an application like that? But best not to have that enabled or use any plugin that relies on it. And there are certain functions that actually access this functionality. In general, no program should be able to load code from another site. But I remember when I worked at university, we used to have this WordPress server that we'd host for all the different groups on the university. And if we turned something like this off, like at least 20% of the websites would break because they either had code or plugins that relied on this insecure functionality. So you're kind of pigeonholed into running this insecure WordPress server, which would frequently do things such as denial of service attack another website and eat up much of the bandwidth for the university, which was kind of interesting, which was a lot at the time.
Right.
Now, The other story that came from ThreatPost was, like macros, attackers are shifting to OLE to spread malware. So, like macros before it, OLE technologies allow for the facilitation of content, images, text from elsewhere, usually by another application. I was like, holy shit. This is the same thing as allow URL F open, except on a Microsoft platform. And everything old becomes new again, because here we are talking about allow URL F open in Microsoft object linking and embedding that are being used today for attacks.
It's the same old tune of cherooting, these ideas. And back on, since we're talking about old stuff, I'll be really old, and I'll talk about on the mainframe. You had a shell, and you control that shell, and only root could, sort of interact between those shells. And yeah, there's all kinds of ways around it, but the design was such that the shell was sacrosanct from the ground up. And this is what we were talking about earlier about security being built in. Right. And on the mainframe, that ideology was built into the basic idea of the mainframe, that the shell is sacrosanct. You don't share things between shells, and that's why you have them. Because
same thing with virtualization in cloud today.
You bet.
There's ways around it, like you said, but the purpose is I run my system, and now I run my application in this virtualized container, and the containers shouldn't be able to load code or see any data in the other container.
And that's what you're going to have to get back to. I mean, the problem is that the security and functionality are always this trade-off. It's this seesaw balance. In a perfect world, we could share everything with everybody, and nobody would do anything bad. But in the real world, unfortunately, that's not true.
Sharing is bad.
Yeah.
This is sharing, right?
Don't share.
Sharing.
The hell with that.
But sharing is what it's all about.
Sharing is caring.
But at companies, people want to share documents.
Yes.
And that's a workflow facilitation. When you get into manufacturing,
people want to share passwords.
Absolutely. When you get well, they do that often enough. We just did one recently where it's like, could you give us like the list of passwords for the mainframe? And they're like, there's just one. It's 901. But people want to do that. When you talk about workflow, if you're an IT person and you're talking to a company about workflow, it facilitates, because you say, well, he can give me a document, I can give him a document, I've got a document open, you're working at the same time. And they do that with code too. Extreme programming and all that stuff was designed with the idea that we're all looking at the same code at the same time. So part of that is just that piece of security ideology foundation was missing, and now they're trying to bolt it on after the fact. So PHP, so WordPress, so OLE, all those things are now, because they were designed to share, there was no security inherent in their design. Now we're trying to figure out ways, how do we isolate them? And again, you have to get back to that shell, sandbox, virtual machine, virtual environment, something, whatever they want to call it.
But a lot of it, I think, in the Microsoft world, and they've largely changed their tune, but I think the death of security at Microsoft, it died for a while, and then they realized that oh shit, we need security, was when who's the CEO of Microsoft, one of the founders, what's his name, Steve Ballmer. Gave that infamous speech, was like developers, right? Like, let's make it easy for developers to write code. Let's make it easy for developers to share things. Yeah. Let's do object linking and embedding, because it's all about developers. Now, I think they've largely, since then, changed their tune and have, I think, some of the best threat modeling, the best secure coding practices, if you look at the number of lines they're putting
improved,
out now. But it goes back to all these old technologies, there's still shit way broken with stuff like OLE. And here are attackers taking advantage of it today.
Yeah, Larry's not here tonight. He's not Skyped in. He's in D.C. teaching a SANS course. We need to telepresent him.
Somebody's in, by the way.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Because he was in D.C., which is kind of my hood, I went down and had dinner with him the other night, and I was asking him, I said, in terms of pen testing, are there any really new techniques that have been developed over the last 10, 15 years, or is it just all variations on a theme? It's really the same discussion we're having here. The same old, how many different ways are there to break into an operating system?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The breaking in portion is a lot of the same variations on a theme.
Right.
Where the new innovations are how you execute the code and like what code executes after the fact. If we look
Right,
at
but it's sort
how-
of an application. It's not.
Yes,
but the methodology hasn't changed.
Like
a
there
whole
was
lot.
some articles this week. I don't know if I added them about JavaScript is one, but also malware using things like PowerShell
Right.
and other things to execute on the system, and those are all after you break in.
Yeah.
Right.
But like
Right.
how you break in, you talk to most pen testers. Number one thing is passwords.
Right.
Number two thing might be old exploits. From 08, 067, that kind
Phishing.
of crap.
Right.
Phishing is a lot of variations on the
But,
theme.
you know-
But like what you do afterwards is interesting and different and new and expanding. But breaking in is breaking in. You know?
Yeah.
Social
But
engineering.
even what you do after you're in, the idea of pivoting, which is not a term that I used when I was pen testing many years ago.
But you did it.
But I did it.
Yeah.
I got onto a box, and the guys I'd work with, they'd be moving on to the next box, and I'd be like, "Well, what kind of information's on this box? What kind of data's here? What can I learn?" And that's how I hacked my first mainframe. I was on a box that was an administrative box, got into his mailbox, found an email that he had sent to himself that had all the domain admin passwords, including the mainframe. So I downloaded an emulator and tried the credentials, and poof, I was on the mainframe.
There you
Yeah,
go.
but I mean, it's still the same thing today too. I mean, I talked to pen testers today, and I look at when I was doing pen test. Hey, look, there's one of our listeners. Hey,
How you doing?
that's awesome. You're like almost on Security Weekly. Like almost. there,
Can you
dude.
turn to the left?
Turn towards the camera.
Do the hokey
Turn-
pokey and turn
Yeah.
yourself around.
No,
There you
it's
go.
still
Can we get
not-
him on camera?
It's still not on camera.
Here, let me move him.
Hold on.
Oh, I just picked him up.
There he is.
Look, there he is.
Yeah.
Hey!
Our
Look.
first telepresence guest on Security
And
Weekly.
he's already been groped.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
How's it feel to have Russell grabbing your
Shaft.
You weren't shy about that either, Russell.
You reached
Well,
right
I
in
mean, you
there.
know.
But even
Ethics.
like on,
Feel free to explore the studio.
on pen tests that I've done to speak to variations on the theme, like if you look at the Mitnick and
Shimamura.
Shimamura.
Yeah.
Tsutomu.
He exploited privileges between systems
Right.
with our services.
Right.
Yeah.
And a pen test that I would do the same thing, except it's SSH.
Right.
And even
Yeah.
in CTFs, the way that I would maintain access I would just trust my key to the root account.
Exactly.
And then they would like remove everything that I've done, but I would just log right back in.
Right.
So
and
the,
I've done that on pen
so
tests.
the
I'm like,
techniques really haven't
Yeah.
changed a whole lot.
Uh,
The stuff we
the
were doing
fundamental
20 years
foundational-
ago are still being done today.
but there's still a lot
there's
of
differences, but there's not.
a lot of nuances today. Like we talked about the telepresence hack, like that's pretty cool.
Right.
And we've done variations on that. I mean, I've been in control of what's the horribly insecure video teleconferencing system. It's like a red logo. It'll come to me.
Polycom?
Polycom. Thank you.
Polycom, yeah.
Oh, were we supposed to not mention that?
I've hacked into Polycom systems and been able to pan and zoom, inside of conference rooms. It's the same kind of thing. So
I had a rental car this weekend that had a GPS in it that had a camera. And I was kind of like, WTF? What's that for?
put some tape over that.
So I turned
Yeah.
I just turned the thing
being
off.
in the cigar industry, people have may or may not told me about how they get around the smoking rules in the car.
Right.
I mean, but put yourself in their shoes. You're flying somewhere. You're a sales representative for a cigar company. You're traveling to cigar places. Even if you're not smoking in the car's still going to smell like cigars.
Right, of course.
And their job is to smoke cigars.
Right. Yeah.
So there's tons of, but if they have video into the cars, now you're screwed.
Now you have a problem. Yeah.
Well, we were even talking last week with Chris Poulin about the IoT and how all these smart cars, we couldn't mention the name of the company, but they had a young man as proof of concept again behind the wheel, and he had his cell phone, and they were able to remotely access the particular car and control the braking and acceleration, and the guy ended up driving into a ditch, not even driving, but being, tele-driven into a ditch.
Tele-driven.
Tele-driven. I'm tele-driven.
But
I don't have any IoT. There was something about a Siemens SCADA hack, but we've covered that so many times in the past. I didn't actually add it, but there's certainly there's some technology that I'm playing around with my house. Oh, hell, I might as well mention them now. What the hell? We're all here and we're drinking, having a good time. So I have a Ring doorbell at home.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Now, I haven't gotten around to really evaluating the security of the doorbell. However, one of the things that I find interesting, even the security incident that they had, was that someone needed physical access to the device or had to interact with the device such that they would be on camera. And, I mean, that's a security deterrent right there. But, yeah, even if you could hack into it, there are still security benefits to this device. And even if it does have issues, a couple of things. One, it's about how the company handles the particular issue. In 24 hours of Ring having that vulnerability disclosed, they updated all of their devices because all of their devices auto-updated.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what Sandra Cantil and I talk about is when you're an IoT company, a startup, how do you build in security? And like one of the major things is how do you do firmware updates? And if you're like, like Sandra Cantil talks to companies all the time, they're like, firmware, what do you mean firmware update? We're trying to make this stuff work, going back to our conversation before.
Yep.
But firmware updates are extremely important because when Ring did have a security vulnerability, they updated all their devices have to be connected to the internet to work. Right. So basically, it's a doorbell that I get on my smartphone. I get a live video feed when someone walks near it, a motion sensor, or rings my doorbell. Then I can push a button to talk to them. Now, they can't see me. I can see them, but we can hear each other and have a conversation. It works phenomenal. I mean, out of all the IoT devices that I have at my house, I have locks, I have SmartThings, lights, garage door. I mean, you name it. I have the Philips Hue bulbs.
You don't
in
have
my
that.
house. I don't have that yet.
You're going to have it tomorrow, yeah.
I've got a lot of IoT stuff at my house, right? And this was the easiest to set up, and functionality-wise, it's awesome. And security, it brings confidence to me that they're able to update the firmware because they can remediate vulnerabilities as.
But it's a push update, eh?
We really should have that on camera so all of our listeners can see themselves on Security Week.
Hold on, I'm going to move.
Fleet. We need a fleet.
You're at the round table.
There you go.
are.
I think all this stuff though comes back to one key thing, which is authentication. I mean, to me, one of the quintessential security pieces for whatever you're talking about, I don't care whether it's walking in the door physically, it's a robot driving around. If there's a way to absolutely authenticate something, whether it's a push update, you've solved a problem. I mean, if your doorbell knows it's your doorbell, and the company knows it's your doorbell, and the doorbell knows it's the company, if those keys are just sacrosanct.
Well, it's a great point, Doug. Like, firmware updates are one thing. Validation of the firmware updates has to be there. But beyond just authentication, well, I think that's important. I also think that embedded device or IoT developers have to understand what someone could do with control of that device. And that's what a lot of people aren't understanding. There's a lot of IoT companies out there, startups and whatever.
But a lot of people don't imagine what else could you do with it besides what they're trying to do with it.
One of my favorite conversations on this subject was with Mike Murray when he came on the show, and he said someone described it to him as they were designing a scalpel. And when you design a scalpel, you think about functionality. How well does it cut?
Yeah.
You don't think about what if someone's going to go stab someone with that scalpel. I liken it to a hammer, right?
Yeah.
You design a hammer to hammer nails to maybe pull out nails, but what if someone goes around and starts bashing people over the head with a hammer? I'm not designing my hammer to prevent that. But with IoT devices, we have to. The PLCs that control nuclear power plants and infrastructure, we have to design them with, well, what if someone else took advantage? How could someone else take advantage of this? And then what could they do? And how can we prevent bad things from happening once they do?
It's the same thing. It's a gestalt. I mean, it's
same thing with the doorbell.
Absolutely. If the security's there, I mean, and part of that's just having. I mean, I've noticed I've been hired to sit on boards before, just to sit there and be us, because nobody else thought like that. Because I was sitting there and somebody says, "Well, what if we build a program like this?" And I go, "Wow, out of WordPress, really?"
Nah.
And they're going, "What? What do you mean? What's wrong with WordPress?" And I'm just making that up. But I mean, and truthfully, like, think about like the people that built like the launch codes for the nuclear weapons. They didn't have those people sitting there. They were a bunch of engineers and coders like us that were sitting there going, yeah, we just got to make this work. Yeah, we don't want people to be able to do it, but I mean, that's,
What if I de-auth the Ring from the wireless network? and then I can break into the house. Now, that raises the bar of the person who's trying to break into my house.
Yep.
They have to now be somewhat not even somewhat, they have to be pretty technologically savvy to understand, to identify the Ring device on my wireless network. First of all, determine which wireless network is mine,
Yep.
which my SSID is like hack naked or something. It's probably not too difficult. But
Yeah, that's a tough one to guess.
I saw another one in my neighborhood. It was like, Jesus is a carpenter. Was their Wi-Fi SSID?
Or like stop having sex on the second floor. I like that one too. Yeah.
Mine is FBI surveillance van.
There you go.
Yeah, but but again,
So they got to figure that out. They got to do a DDoS attack, and then they hit the break.
but
into
that's
the
this
house.
thing. That's this thing where the more you shift this away from total clown to Uber hacker, the more, and there's two dimensions to this. There's this dimension of just I can do it. Right. So over here is the total clown who can log in because it's just wide open, and over here is Uber hacker who's developed some elaborate, combined attack in conjunction with the Chinese government. Now it starts to, the other dimension is the money. We were talking about that earlier. Now it becomes about what's the gain.
Yes.
So now it's really hard to hack Paul's doorbell. What do I get if I hack Paul's doorbell?
Right.
And the answer is, well, I don't get much. I get a doorbell hack. Oh, so that's that other trade-off.
I can hack the doorbell, but then I got to figure out how to remotely unlock, or be willing to throw a brick through the window, which makes a lot of noise. Or pick the lock.
And on that other scale, at some point it doesn't matter. I mean, at some point it's like saying if someone wants to kill you, if it's just some clown and you're wearing body armor, okay, you're cool. If it's a nation state and they say we're willing to throw our entire military and bankrupt our economy to get you,
right,
you're going to get got. And so that's...
But even take that a step further, we're going to make it not look like us if they're going to put
Sure.
going to poison my water
resources, as long as you got that.
And I'm just going to drop dead someday.
But that will get rid of people, because if you make it hard enough, the clowns have to move on to something easier. Right. But there's a danger in that too, because eventually there's not enough easy targets, and then the clowns start going, well, I better up my skills a little bit because I'm going to keep doing
learning. Well, that's what I'm worried about with cars. Because now there's so much technology in our cars.
Yep.
And I think it behooves all of the car thieves now to start learning this technology. Because now it's not just as easy as a shim. Maybe it still is. Who knows? But now they can use technology. I think they're going to start acquiring those skills to be able to do that. And we see new car hacks come out every week. I could talk about.
But you would think that to monetize it, most of them are going to still want to try to figure out a way to use the technology in the car to steal the car.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think a lot of these, you're talking
Not
about
drive it into a ditch. Or,
No,
I'm sorry.
no. They want to steal it.
And you're talking about,
they want to steal the ones that are most valuable for parts.
Or blackmail you.
Right.
I mean, crypto locker a car, and then
Ransomware
oh my
car.
God,
I
ransomware
love
the car. Yeah, that's great.
you get
Here, pay $2,500 and I'll free up your car. Yeah.
Think about how many
I like
people would
that.
pay that, though. You get in your car, like you're sitting out at the ski area, and you go back and it's 20 below zero, and you get to start the car, and you go, and and on the screen it pops up.
The attacker's like, hey, if you got Android Pay,
Yeah.
you can just hold it up to the car and you're good to go. Like $500. Like you would pay if you were stuck somewhere. Where
Hell
it's really
yeah, you
cold,
would.
You would pay $500.
Yeah, it's
Here's
like,
my
all
Android
right,
phone.
deal.
That's fine,
But you've got
whatever.
like sort of this scale that you're talking about, right? And on one end you've got your noobs, and on the other end you've got your oobs. And like these IoT devices, what they're doing, I think, in my opinion, they're opening up more doorways, right? It used to be like, all right, let's think about just a single door into a house with no technology. If you want to break in, you got to get in through a door or a window. Okay, so there are a couple windows, maybe a door. But now with these IoT devices, and I can hack into my toaster, or somebody can hack into my toaster to get to my smart connected credit card. Which this is okay. So I'm reaching out a bit, but
That's a stretch.
But okay, but it's still like the possibility might be there, and so. I don't know, I don't want to blindly adopt these technologies. I think, we need more cautious, like err on the side of caution kind of thing. Like you guys talked about earlier in the shows, like Doug was saying, rather than going from proof of concept first to, implementation, well, let's start with maybe security and then trying proof of concept. He's showing his desktop. Oh, he's got BSOD. That is not a venereal disease. That's
Well, it could
blue
be.
screen of death. Yeah.
It's kind of a venereal disease.
He's got BSOD.
That's awesome.
All right.
You successfully BSOD'd the show.
I love it.
That's
Great
it for
job.
us then.
Yeah.
A for effort.
You win a gallon of lube
or beer.
or beer.
Yeah, we could just sell the lube. We just put it in like gallon jugs and ship it out to you.
We ferment it right here on site.
What's he got here? KBDHID.sys. Oh, is it a high file? I don't even know what the hell that is, but
That's awesome.
manually initiated. Oh, he manually initiated crash.
One of the other interesting stories that I had was JavaScript and email attachments as part of ransomware. So apparently, the quote is, yet the Windows script host, a service built into Windows, can natively execute JavaScript and other scripting files out of the box. As if JavaScript wasn't crappy enough to run in a browser, it can execute in the operating system, and they're using this because JavaScript has encryption libraries built in. They're using this to ransomware your PC. Yep. And getting around a lot of the endpoint protection, not that that's any news for anyone, right? But getting around a lot of the endpoint protection in order to do that. So,
well, they recently started running the ransomware inside inline frames, right? So you could go to any website, it would execute a code, and that your machine's bricked unless you pay $2,500. That's what happened to a local, let's say, police department who paid the $2,500. It happened to a local library.
But if you're running it in the browser, how does it break out of the browser and encrypt your hard drive or files? Like some of this JavaScript will identify like .doc.
Sure. Oh, and it does that. Yeah.
Because the browser has access to those files, they're able to.
I guess it's part of the API, so it can reach out through the API to Windows functions that are allowing system functions to be executed. So
to encrypt files that you have access to.
So I don't know this. I'm just kind of speculating, but I mean, if it could grab an API that's got those functions in it, which it probably has, then it could execute various pieces of code.
Or browser vulnerability.
Well, it sounds like it's exploiting features that were built in to enable sharing.
Or
like file upload.
Which is the paradox that we're dealing with.
Or a vulnerability in the browser or other.
Or just a privilege. It could just be a privilege violation where, the thing's just running with too high a level.
What we used to call features.
Absolutely.
Or Flash.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about that.
Flash had a. Did I put it in here? Flash had another 0 day.
Something today, right? Was it Wired? I think
the patch was released today.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I upgraded Flash on my computers today because there was a
saw that
vulnerability that people were exploiting.
I saw that this morning.
It's really
but with HTML5, what do you think? More secure, less secure? Do you continue on? I mean, does Java, do Sun Microsystems, or Flash isn't going to be much longer anyway, but
client-side technologies like Java, Flash, and all that, I think are just riddled with, to plug all those security holes. We've talked about Adobe Flash vulnerabilities since we started this show, over 10 years ago. So I think those technologies are way more prone to vulnerabilities with a proven track record of vulnerabilities.
A lot of those technologies were developed so quickly because the market was so fast and companies trying to get product to market quickly that they did not have time. And again, it was that coder, make it work. I'm the marketing department. We already promised this thing on January 1. You get it working or you're fired.
So much so with Flash that this is the first show that we've live streamed over YouTube, largely because we don't want to have people to use Flash. Now, if you watch it on a mobile device, it will use HTML5. We were using Ustream before, and we're making the migration to YouTube. One, to save cost, and two, kind of in the same, like 0 and 1, right? 0 to save cost. 1, because we don't want people to use Flash. Because when you go there with a browser, it's kind of like hit or miss for me, with depending on which browser and what operating system. If I have a Flash blocker, and I tell my browser to put a user agent string, then I'm an iPad, it'll sometimes load HTML5, but on some platforms and browsers, it'll still load Flash, try and load Flash. And I'm like, this is, for a security show, this isn't working. Flash is not, I'm not making my listeners use Flash anymore. So we paid $10 for software, and then the YouTube beta live stream is free. And so we're streaming over YouTube now.
Makes sense. I mean, that thing is scary.
Because Flash is so freaking crappy.
No, it scares me to death.
I've had a Flash blocker in my browser for years.
Me too, yeah.
But with AdBlocker Plus, is that the one that you were... Yeah, and so...
AdBlocker is one thing, but there's a JavaScript blocker which is separate.
Oh, because AdBlocker now, if I go to Wired, I can't view Wired magazine online anymore.
That's a different issue.
Oh, so...
We talked about this on the show before, Russell. And in fact, we got some listener email about it. They wanted us to interview someone kind of on the flip side that runs sites that provide ads.
Okay.
But what's happening today is Forbes and Wired are two major violators of this. If you visit their sites with an ad blocker, they put a pop-up that blocks the content and says, you need to register your email with our site in order to view this site ad-free.
Yeah.
And of course, they're most likely selling your email address to
Yeah, of
someone to make
course.
up for that
Yep.
revenue stream
Yep.
because
Yep.
you're not looking at their ads.
Yep.
It's a huge problem. And I've gotten some feedback from some listeners because I've said in the show in the past, yes, we have ads on our site. Yes, they're just images. And yes, I stole all of the code myself and reviewed it. And it's just JavaScript that's displaying a random GIF or
Yep.
JPEG image on our site. And that's all it is. Now, I've done some interesting things to get around ad blockers to do that, but I'm not executing any. I'm just displaying an image. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
And if you want to block that, that's fine. You can block it. It's not like with Wired or Forbes. That's our major revenue source, right? We do ads on our podcast, right? It's different for us, but I don't like having to go to Forbes or Wired and then give up some of my personal information just because I'm running an ad blocker. Like, there's a huge problem. There's a huge disconnect now with ads and ad blockers in certain sites. So much so that if they run an article, we'll search for different sources of that article and information, which makes it tricky because being as big as Wired and Forbes, sometimes they got the exclusive on things.
Yep.
You can't find it anywhere. Like, they broke the news.
But then you look at like Gizmodo and what happened. The biggest news this week: Gawker filed Chapter 11, right? I mean, those are Lifehacker, Gizmodo, right? Where do we go for news? Like, if they fold, where are we going to go for news? And now do we have to pay? Do they just become another iteration of Fox or CNN or any, that kind of thing where it was mediated?
Well, that's been the model so far. I mean, people have not really found a good revenue model for these free sites and things. It hasn't
for
worked.
written content.
Yeah, it hasn't
right.
worked very well. And the cost is very high because they have a lot of researchers and they have a lot of people working there. So, there's sort of, and I went through this early on with like New York Times because I had this problem. I didn't like New York Times bringing me paper every day.
Yeah.
And I was talking to New York Times, and I was like, I don't want all this paper. Can you just let me subscribe online? They're like, oh, you can't really do that. And, but somebody has to pay for all this reporting. I mean, somebody has to pay those guys' salaries. So it's a tricky business.
It is.
And we don't want to do it. So we want to go to these free sites, and we don't want them to jam ads in our face. But at the same time, I'm going, well, yeah, but who's paying these guys?
Right.
It's great to have free stuff, but sometimes you got to pay somebody to actually do the work, and that gets ugly when there's just no revenue model. And I don't know the answer, but I don't like them pushing stuff onto my machine either.
It's an interesting evolution of technology, economics, in how we consume our information.
What is? I mean, New York Times used to be a customer of mine, and of course, nobody listening ever actually gets a newspaper these days. But
Right.
when you got the paper, it was filled with ads, and that's how they make their money. They don't
Absolutely.
make their money by the however much you had to pay
Right.
to get the paper. That's just covering the cost of delivery.
Exactly.
The money is in the advertising, which has been true in radio, television, and now it's on the internet.
Yep.
But in the hacker community, most of us like to get all of our things free.
Of course.
And why should we
Well,
pay
not
for
just-
anything?
Well, not just that. I think a lot of us are willing to pay if there's a benefit. But in our security community, especially, and I think that even trickles into much of the people in technology, we run an ad blocker on our browser because of two things. It's security, and it's the annoyance factor.
Absolutely.
And in security especially, it's really security, right? Because we know that ads can be a security risk. They can inject code. We've covered stories in the past 10 years in the show where all kinds of bad things happen because an ad serving service was hacked, or they linked to a server. One of their servers was hacked and serving up adware. Right? When we talk it's malicious code inside the ads. So we're all cognizant of that. So we run ad blockers largely for security. I think a lot of people in technology run it because of the annoyance factor too.
Well, I can live with ads like the newspaper style ads. So if I went to a website and I want to watch a story or whatever, I prefer to read them myself. But if I went to a website and there's an ad on the side of the screen like in the newspaper, I don't have a problem with that. I don't like them pushing stuff on my machine, and I don't like cookies and all that. But I can live with that, but I don't like the ones where it's like, well, you got to watch this 1 minute ad to read this story. I'm like, nope, no thanks, because the newspaper, I didn't have to do that. I didn't turn the page in the newspaper and it says, to read this next page, you must read this page.
Well, in a lot of sites you go to, they're like, you have to watch this ad for 15 seconds, and when that's done, and YouTube does the same thing.
Yeah, they do.
You have to watch this ad, and then you can only skip after a certain amount of time.
Right.
That's because they're paying PewDiePie $4 million a year or whatever they're paying him. So
PewDiePie, yeah.
PewDiePie.
I like PewDiePie. He used to be funny. Now he's gotten a little hackneyed, but he used to be funny when he was first around. He was better when he had his girlfriend.
But on YouTube, the risks are somewhat different, right? Because an ad inside of a video,
Right.
the level of maliciousness, like what can you do with an ad? I mean, it's a video running on top of another video.
Yeah.
They're not really able to inject any malicious code.
No.
And that's sheerly an annoyance.
It's just
factor.
purely annoying.
It's purely annoying.
You can continue in 5 seconds. And that's configured. Some YouTube channels, you have to actually watch the ad before you get to the
Lots of them you
content.
do, yeah. And then you have to watch ads at certain intervals, before you can get to the next content.
I think it's really forcing content creators to have good enough content where you're willing to watch an ad for that long to get to the content.
And they also they're learning, because when they first started doing this, I saw ads that were like 2 minutes long. And it was just click, nope, it's not worth it. I'm sorry, that might have been interesting, but I don't think so.
Right.
But they're learning. What is that time frame? How important? And it's an interesting measure, actually. How important is this story? So they break a story. Like if CNN starts doing that, and they break a story in an hour from now that says there was a giant thing in Providence, and like, how long would you watch an ad to see what's going on? Versus, you're seeing them get down to 15 and 10 and even 5 seconds. I saw a 5-second ad yesterday.
Right.
So it's forcing the marketers to figure out what are you willing to tolerate to see this, because I go crazy on CNN. They have a video on there. The video's 30 seconds long. You had to watch a 30-second commercial to see the 30-second video, which actually isn't anything related to what they said the headline was.
It's a give and a take.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't think so, CNN. I'm going to go somewhere else. I'll go.
But when you start paying subscriptions, like for instance, if I had read recently that Netflix and Amazon Prime are looking at advertising models to supplement the cost to keep the cost of the membership down. Well, YouTube Red, right? And then when I go, I think of something even more simpler than that. I go to Showcase Cinema. I pay whatever $12 for a movie ticket, right?
And like $800 for snacks. Right?
But then I'm also subjected to these ridiculous advertisements for the first half hour of the show. Now I don't want to show up until I'm 5 minutes after, because then you get a shitty seat. But then so what do you do? Like, how do you deal with that? And how much? What is that magic number?
It's an evolutionary thing.
Yeah, it is.
And advertising, which is a huge revenue market traditionally for a lot of different media, is just changing, and they're trying to figure it out.
They are, yeah.
I mean,
we're trying to figure it out.
We're old enough that we remember you'd wait for your favorite TV to come, show to come on, Thursday at 9 o'clock or whatever.
And if you missed it, you just missed
through
it.
the commercials. And nowadays, everybody can TiVo and record them and fast forward, and you can avoid all the ads.
Well, it's the same thing with our show. You can totally fast forward through the ads if you want.
So are we saying
we don't recommend you do that, because
I should hire an advertising company and put it on my robot so they have to sit through an ad before they log into my class? That'd be kind of fun.
But the security, the truth is I can live with the annoyance if I want it bad enough. The security factor bothers me a lot more. Now, the video doesn't bother me very much, but a lot of, I've seen stuff blocked now. I saw one the other day. I don't remember what it was, but it threw up, it like pixelated the site, and it said, "Are you tired of viewing this through this Fresnel lens? Watch this ad to get rid of it." And it was like, no, thank you.
To go back to one of your comments, Doug, I think was you said you had to watch a video, and the advertisement really had nothing to do with the content of the video.
Right, true.
Right.
One of the things that here in this show, like our advertisers are all in security.
Yeah.
And we vet our advertisers, right?
Yeah.
So we don't put YouTube ads on any of our videos, but we have ads that are built into our show that are all related to computer
But
security.
that's that part of that marketing model where they learn. And I mean, there's always been that though too. I mean, it was, in the 60s they started learning, well, you put these ads on these shows, and then there were late night TV ads where you're going, what the hell?
Tampons?
Because you don't know why this ad.
YouTube did an okay job. I don't know what it looks like today, but like when I would run YouTube ads on our channel when I had it enabled, because I did for some time, it would be mostly video games. Which, I mean, there's some overlap. I mean, people watching and listening to this show are likely technology people that play video games.
Maybe, yeah.
I can see that. I can see that. But then there'd be like the random one for like
Summer's Eve.
Not so fresh feeling this morning.
car insurance or whatever.
So maybe
you know?
the solution is the advertising industry needs to come up with some way of making them like the Super Bowl commercials, which have become a thing that people want to watch.
Wait for, yeah.
You know, and
Well, that's the
ooh,
thing.
let's
Some
wait for
ads
it.
are so good on
Yeah.
YouTube. Now it's a very small percentage. I'm like, I kind of want to. I want to stick through. I'm not going to continue because I want to see this ad. I want to see this ad.
Or what about
so
all
it's really raising to your point, raising the bar for advertising.
Identifying that magic number where consumers are willing to pay enough to get rid of the ads altogether.
Yeah.
I don't mind paying $30 a month. Well, maybe not $30 a month, but $20 a month for a YouTube subscription if I don't have to sit through their BS ads.
A lot of listeners I talk to are like, they're comfortable with what we're doing here on the show in terms of advertising and content because we give so much content away. So
Got
it's
it.
a give and a take.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of my good friends, Gene Kim, explained that to me. He's like, you're giving a lot, so people are going to be paid. But I monitor that very closely.
Sure.
Talk to people.
That's the
who
news- that's the
subscribe to
newspaper
show all-
model.
Yeah, but I talk to people all the time. You know, how are we doing?
But no,
how
that's-
comfortable are you with how we're structuring?
But it's another balance. It's between
Yes.
intrusiveness, annoyance, and risk.
Yes,
And
exactly.
and what do
Very
you
well
get
put.
in return? So if I'm not going to go watch some kitten video, I got to sit through a 1 minute ad for suppositories to see. But if it's something that's valuable enough to me, like say how to use this lube or whatever, then maybe I'm going to pay more attention.
A lot of us in the security community are getting older, though. So
That's true, yeah.
We suppositories and
Lube.
hemorrhoid cream that might be applicable
Yeah.
to us. Jack can speak to that certainly.
There's this interesting
Viagra ads? Maybe we need to run some Viagra. No, maybe not.
There's this interesting group of people out of Europe. They're called CSAC. Have you heard of the SESAC?
No.
Anyway, they have inserted themselves as middleman between restaurants or companies that play music in public venues and the artists. So they were like, what was it, the Recording Industry, RIA, Recording Industry Association of America.
Yes.
So what they've done now is they're doing, they're calling all restaurants. They get their names from, I assume, Google or Yellow Pages or White Pages, and they call them, hey, do you play music? And if somebody says yes, well, okay, and then that's their entry. So now they send them a cease and desist order, and then they send, well, you have to pay this amount of money for this many people based on the number of clients that you have and the number of speakers or music things. But where it gets really shady is here. Some of their artists they consider as television commercials. So if you are just sitting at a restaurant or a bar, we wouldn't know anything about bars here, right? And you see a commercial for like Honda. Well, they are licensed or sanctioned by CSAC, not Honda, but I'm just using an example. And if you hear their commercial, the restaurant the restaurant isn't a member of CSAC, which is an annual fee of something like $750, then the restaurant is liable for damages to the commercial. Right? And so now you have to pay these people X number of dollars based on the number of customers that you get just because you're listening to a commercial. But I don't want to listen to the commercial. So now it falls on the restaurant to mute the volume. So and they say they've been around since the 1930s. Now I understand for DRM for musicians that's one thing, but I mean, when we are subject to cable television with commercials, why should the restaurant be or the business be liable for this particular thing? I don't think that's fair. So I don't know.
It's not about fair. It's about
I
Money.
ways to get revenue.
Yeah.
That's what it's always about.
And the
It's-
economic
That's what
model-
hacking's about, right?
The economic models push the envelope. You can do as much as the buying public will absorb.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something else.
Yeah.
So I had one more story I wanted to cover. And this one was about a database corruption erases 100,000 Air Force investigation records. Now, regardless of the details of the story, we talk a lot about ransomware and leaked passwords and breaches. But I guess my question, sometimes I pose questions to the audience and the host, right? How much more or less damage is done by accident than malicious hacking, right? It kind of got me thinking about that. Like, we talk a lot about how, wow, you got breached, that's really bad. But is the really bad do we need to focus more about like good IT practices? And how does that relate to security? Like, are some of these breaches, like, in the grand scheme of things, almost less disruptive than bad IT practices that, in this case, like database corruption? Like, how do you, having good backups or having good IT practices?
If you're
preventing
pragmatic
stuff?
and you're looking, if you're a company, an organization, and you're trying to look at, what do we have that's sensitive? What do we need to protect? What's the impact of losing the data, having the data stolen? You're really going through a risk assessment, and a risk assessment would include more than just bad guys steal, hackers break in and steal it. It would include things like what happens if a database loses 100,000 records? What is the impact of that? Risk assessment is not just about security.
Yeah.
It's about data loss. It's about identifying what's sensitive, what's valuable, what happens if you lose it for whatever reason. The fundamental idea of data protection is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA. You have to consider all of those. Not all of those are malicious. Not all of those are bad guys doing something bad to you. Right. Some of that is, stupid users doing stupid things.
For us, from when I've done these, I've done far more audit gigs and response gigs that involve basically stupid user tricks.
Right.
I mean, all this is interrelated, but we always look at things from a perspective of profile. So say you're the FBI, you're a huge target. So your threat vector from hacking or nation state hacking or whatever is very high. But if you're, say, a public utility in Arizona, your threat vector is not very high. You get a few angry customers, but most of them aren't going to have hacking skills, and they're going to come after you. And it's a possibility, but it's the same threat. Their real business threat is loss of data due to other. So right. Disaster. Like I was talking before, I think I was talking here before about people who've never tested their backups. Like I did one where they had never ever tested, could they do a restore? They had backups, they did them religiously, but when they went to try to do a restore as a result of the audit, they found out that, guess what? The read heads on these tape machine they had didn't work. It would write, but it wouldn't read.
Right.
They didn't know this for years and years and years, and when they went to try to find a replacement to pass the audit, they don't even make this thing anymore. They hadn't made it in years, and they couldn't find one. So it's like, well, all these backups you have are worthless. You're not going to be able to use them. So if your business was wiped out or you got crypto lockered or whatever, the real damage isn't the crypto lockering. It's the fact that their backups are screwed up. If somebody actually, and I've done a couple where a clerk just typed, erase. Whatever the local command you prefer is. But they just literally black holed the system, and then they called us and said, can you bring this back online? And it's like, well, have you got backups? Maybe. I've seen more fiduciary harm from that, I think, and that's why DRP or business continuity planning is what they call it now, but I still like calling it disaster planning because the marketing people don't like that. But I like the term disaster because that's what it is. It's not this nice, clean business sound like George Carlin. It's not this clean term. Business continuity planning is fine. It's disaster. Yep. You're screwed. Your life is over. Your company's going to the drain. And the smaller the company, the more dramatic that is because you got one location in Warwick. And that's it. And that place is taken out, whether it is by hacking or it's by a fire or it's by whatever. You're screwed. And if you're, and they say if you're down for more than whatever your cycle is, you're probably going to go under.
Well, a good case study of that is going back to 9/11. All the companies that were doing business in the World Trade Center, there was a certain percentage of them that never reopened because they had no disaster recovery planning, and everything about the company was obliterated.
Yep. And if you can't get back online within a business cycle for your customers, you're going to be done. And in the internet world, life is even worse because there's so many alternatives. So if and we all know that. You jump on there and you go to Amazon and you say, I want to buy this William Gibson book. Amazon's down. I'm going somewhere else. I'm not going to say, oh, no, Amazon's down. I think I'll wait to keep my loyalty. No, I'm going to go to the next site that's selling that William Gibson book, and I'm going to buy it from them.
Right.
And I may never go back to Amazon because I say, oh, this is a much better site.
Right.
So, yeah, it's I mean, that's scary stuff. You start talking about that. But I think that that's less in the hacking world, depending on your profile. You know, if you're a big target, that's a different matter. Hackers are going to come after you. Whereas if you're a low-profile target, or you're a difficult target or whatever, the risk is so much more from users. And phishing is the same way. I mean, every time I see the FBI, I ask them, what's the most thing you're getting? And it's phishing every time. I haven't had that in 2 years that they weren't telling me phishing was the big call they get from companies.
And it's typically not phishing that's targeting any particular company.
Yep.
It's phishing that's just literally phishing. What's going to?
It's not spear
What
phishing.
are we going to hook?
Yep. It's just, can I get lucky and grab some guy at IBM and I take the whole place down?
I mean, some of the payment card breaches the last couple of years, and I hate the target as the victim because they weren't targeted.
Yep.
In particular, they just happened to be vulnerable and they could get at them.
Yep.
And that's hard to sell when you're trying to sell security to companies to say, well, if somebody really wants to go after you, they'll get you. But, if you want to protect yourself from just the general, somebody's trying to get you a type of attacks, here's what you can do.
The phrase I always use when I'm pitching these things to companies is, don't be the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
Yes.
The low-hanging fruit's going to get picked.
But don't be the low-hanging fruit when it comes to security. But I think equally as important, don't be the low-hanging fruit when it comes to IT or technology.
Absolutely.
Right.
They go hand in hand. And each can be equally as damaging, but each is just as much work.
Well,
To
it's
have
IT, it's technology.
but they go hand in hand.
It's business practices, it's procedures, because there's been just as many incidents where data's been lost because somebody left their laptop that had all the company data in it, in their rental car, and it was stolen, or
Because they smoked in.
And got caught on camera.
Or they got, they left it at the bar, they left it at the hotel or whatever. I mean, there's almost no end to the variables, but, basic common sense business process practices, just safe procedures. That's one of the biggest things, but we tend to sell security based on all the, the hackers that are out there that could be doing all these bad things. This may not be a popular position, but I kind of think, since all the bad's out there, all the vulnerabilities out there that could be happening, why aren't they happening already? And the answer, quite honestly, I think, is because there's no money in it.
Yeah.
If the hackers figured out a way to monetize it, they'd be doing it.
Oh, absolutely. But the hardest sell of all, though, I was in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a speech to it was 800, or it wasn't that many, but it was a whole pile of small companies.
20.
3. 2.
700.
It was between 2 and 800. But the question keeps coming up when you do these presentations, because I'm always trying to sell these people on these ideas.
Right.
These are the toughest sales of all. They have no resources. They have no budget. And you go to these companies and look at them. And these can be anything from, say, 2 to 5,000 employees. I mean, and they're still mid-sized companies. You go look at their IT organization, it may be 2 people. You look at their security organization.
If you're lucky. It's
Yeah,
2
you look at their security organization, it's usually 0 people. Right. Or it's the same 2 IT people. And they say, we trade off. On Tuesday, I'm the security officer and he's the IT director, and we switch every other day. And you go, and I mean, so these 2 people have...
At 5,000, though, they have to have at least 1 or 2 people in security.
Not necessarily.
No.
That might be a best practice recommendation.
Oh, it would be a best practice recommendation, but it's a far cry from being a practice. I mean...
That depends on the industry, though.
Well, it does depend on the industry, but even then, I mean, that's a place that's been so hard to sell because it's a person, and what happens is they get absorbed. They'll go out and they get gigged in an audit, and they say, okay, you need a security person. They say, okay, yeah, we'll comply. So they come and hire Paul. Well, Paul comes on board, and they say, okay, your job is security, Paul. You're going to do pen test, you're going to do audit, you're going to do assessment.
But you work in the network group or the sysadmin group. Or
the second day you're there, somebody says, man, we're screwed. The email server's down. And Paul goes, well, I could take care of that. Mm-hmm. And then boom, all of a sudden you're the email manager. And, oh yeah, that security stuff, I'll get back to that next week. And the CEO's on the phone to you going, I don't care what your job is. Get the damn network running again right now, or everybody.
That's great. That's something we haven't really explored too much on the show, is where the social interactions in the company play into security like that, and that's totally true. In the up to 5,000, I agree. That's a good measure. 5,000 employees is the
I've been around long enough, and I've worked with enough companies
with an abacus,
with an abacus.
punch cards,
There's
Colored
8-inch
rocks.
floppies.
while you would like to think you can make assumptions, this particular industry, this particular
Laptops
company,
that
this
weigh 80
particular
pounds.
size, you would think that they would, be doing something right, or they'd be further along, or they'd have the people. But more often than not, they don't.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's a norm, assume they don't have what they should have.
Security was easier when the norm was 80-pound laptops and 8-inch floppies.
Well, security was easier before the internet when if you had sensitive data, it was written down on paper and locked in a safe.
My first company, we had a T1, which was a lot.
Yeah.
Our own 3-letter domain name
Hell yeah.
that we hosted ourselves.
And
There you go.
And you owned how much?
Now we're dating ourselves.
How much IP address space did you have? You owned a Class C.
Oh yeah, like a whole. They gave us like a whole Class C.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't quite a Class C, but they gave us a bunch.
But
Now you don't get any. Now you're gonna host that shit somewhere else.
I've had customers.
And if you have a 3-letter domain name, it ends in like .network or
XXX.
.xxx or something.
But I've had
Not
customers
even.
even within the
.xxx
last 10
is
years.
expensive. I own hacknaked.xxx. It's like ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, they are.
On the
weird.
flip side, I've had customers within the last 6 years, let's say, that were big companies that bought their Class B range, and damn it, they're going to use it.
Wow.
And they're using it everywhere.
Yeah.
Just to keep it.
Yeah, just to keep it. So all of their internal addresses are routable Class B addresses.
Wow.
Wow.
Well, we went really late on this segment because we were just talking and drinking
did.
and smoking, which is fine, which is the spirit of this show. And I want to thank everyone. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
I want to thank everyone.
wanna thank
watching this
everyone's.
Thanks, everyone's for watching this show. And that concludes this episode of Security Weekly. Thanks to all of our in-studio guests and co-hosts who were the only ones here. No one on Skype.
Oh, we had a robot.
Plus
And
all of
plus our robots,
our listeners
and
that were able to
headsets
log
and
in.
all various technology. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you next week on Security Weekly.